Hello, I'm very happy to have you here, and I don't really know how to call you. When did you decide to change your name and why?
I changed my name about a year ago. I've been thinking about it for a long time, actually, but it was after I finished writing the apology.
Which is called in Italian Chiedimi scusa. This is the book.
Yes. And I felt because the book was really my attempt to write my father's apology to me for all the harms he has done to me, from sexually abusing me to physically abusing me. It was a very grueling process. It was very much like an exorcism of types. And at the end of it, I felt he was gone. It was done. And there was no reason any longer to have his name. Not only the name he had given me, but his own last name. And I felt it was time for a new era in my life, to have the name that felt like my name and to really create, I'm now in my third act. So I decided I was going to have a free third act that was going to be of my own making, of my own imagination and my own creation. And I love the idea of just having a letter for a name. I'm down to a letter and soon I'll be nothing. But I feel lighter. And I feel not kind of bolded down by the past.
I imagine it was quite difficult to give voice to a man, and a man that was so badly important for your life.
It was really a very, very profound, disturbing, painful, but also very liberatory experience. I think climbing into my father, who lives in me so deeply anyway. I mean, I think what people don't realize is that when a person invades you or occupies you or violates you, they enter you, they become you, they occupy you. So I think often I knew what my father was feeling when my father didn't know what he was feeling, because I was so in tune, and I was also always protecting myself. So I had to know his moods. I had to know did he come home angry? Did he come home drunk? Did he come home quiet? And I think going through this process where I had to feel my father's early childhood pain, really look at what the demands were, the patriarchal demands were on my father, and what that turned him into, the distortions and the monstrous qualities it endowed him with, was really profound for me, because it gave me much more empathy for men, and trying to understand, how does one go from a gentle little boy to become a person who's capable of raping and beating his daughter? I mean, I think it's a real question. And I think as painful as it was for me to feel my father's pain, it was also liberation.
I want to make a step backwards to 1996, when you opened in a small venue in New York with the Vagina Monologues. Why did you choose theater? Why did you think a monologue could work in this situation?
Well, I've always loved the theater since I was a child. I remember the first play I ever went to was Oliver on Broadway. And I just couldn't believe there was such a thing as theater, that the kind of dramatization of what is inside people, the costumes, the lights, and also just that we're all there gathered in the dark as strangers, and this energy and this thing, we're creating it with the performers, we're making it happen. So I always loved theater. And I feel like what people call dramatic for me seems normal, right? I've lived at high velocity emotionally. So it serves my personality. And in terms of monologue, I've mainly written monologues for women, right? And I think often women don't get heard. Our stories don't matter. The details, the elongation of our stories don't get heard. There's no time for us. We don't take center stage. We aren't allowed to go into the depth of our histories. We have countries inside of us. We have multitudes inside of us, but nobody gets to hear about that. So the monologue is an amazing form which allows for that storytelling, but also it has, to me, monologues have arcs. They have beginnings, middle, and ends. And I think I love to shape a person's life around the specificities of that kind of storytelling, because I think it not only allows women this ability to take real space, but it also allows all of us to kind of fall into someone's life. But I will say that I love the fact that the monologues are individual monologues within a community of monologues. You know, there's a safety in that community, and there's a beauty that everybody's telling their individual story within a group of women.
And from your act, a woman, a young woman with a monologue in a small cafe in Greenwich Village, something very great came out. Can you tell us the story, how the story did go on from these evenings?
It's really just such a miraculous story, you know. I mean, it's kind of speaks to the power of vagina magic, you know. I think, you know, I remember when I first did it in this little cafe and then in this very little theater, my greatest hope was that I wouldn't be shot, that I'd survive. But immediately, the response was incredible, you know. And after every show, women would line up. First of all, to say they were having tons of feelings, but mainly because they wanted to tell me their story. They had never heard anybody tell these stories before. And suddenly they were like, I want to tell you my story, and I want to tell you my story. And this happened to me. And at first I thought, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to hear the stories of these fabulous sex lives and women coming into their... In fact, I would say 90% of those stories were women who had been incested or raped or abused, and they had never told anyone before. So I remember there was a period of a few years where I would just sit in my office and women would come in all day long and just sit and tell me their stories. And often they wouldn't leave because it was the first time. It was like a dam had opened and they could fully express what had happened in their lives. And then as they spoke to me, I would listen, and then I would go away and I would create these fictional pieces. The monologues are not interviews, they're crafted literary pieces. But when I would put them into the world, the same thing would happen. Then more women would come and more women would come. And, you know, it just became one of these things that someone said, well, let's bring it to here. And I remember at the beginning, someone invited me to Oklahoma, and somebody invited me to Israel, and someone invited me to Italy. And it was and very weird venues. Sometimes I'd only have a light bulb over my head, but it was so exciting because it was like something was getting unearthed. These stories were just being like, shoot. And before I knew it, then I was doing it off Broadway, and then I went to London and did it in the West End, and then I went to, and it's just been this incredible, almost like some kind of a flowering plant, you know, that keeps giving birth within itself to the next thing that's within itself, and it doesn't end. It doesn't end. You know, it's.
But at a certain moment, another project came out, which is the V-Day. How did it happen?
Well, I think because I was hearing so many women telling me stories about their abuse and their rape, and I couldn't not do anything about that. It just felt immoral, and it felt, you know, and I am an activist, and I've always been an activist. So I thought, well, how can we use the play to really end violence against women and girls, to say we are going to stop this? And so in 1998, I called all these wonderful actors, from Whoopi Goldberg to Glenn Close to Susan Sarandon to Marissa Tomei. And I said, would you perform it one night in New York? And let's see if we can raise money for all these great groups in New York, anti-violence groups. And they said yes. And it ended up being a venue for 2,500 people. And it really just blew the roof off the theater. And after that, we realized that we were onto something. And we could really start thinking of how could this play raise consciousness and raise money to end violence. And so my producer, who produced off Broadway, made a deal with me that $5 of every ticket would go to groups who are working to end violence against women. And in those years off Broadway, we raised $5 million, which then really began to allow us to start this movement. And then I decided that I would give the play away free during a period of time of the year where local groups all around the world could put on the play for free and raise money in their own communities, which would stay locally in those rape crisis centers or hotlines or whatever was necessary. I'm really proud to say that these amazing women and men, because men directed and produced it across the planet, have been doing the play now for 23 years and raised close to, I think, $120 million. That's all stayed in those communities. And it then gave birth to our next movement, which was 1 Billion Rising, which is a huge mass action through dance and artistry to end violence against women and girls around the world.
And it all started from a monologue in a cafe in New York.
Yeah.
And this year, 1 Billion Rising has a new word in it. What did happen in the project?
Well, I'm so excited about this year. I mean, every year we have a gathering of world coordinators who come from all the different regions of the world, and we figure out what the theme will be. And it's been 1 Billion Rising for Justice, 1 Billion Rising Revolution. And this year we were all talking about COVID and what this virus has done and how there is so much food insecurity in the world. We're actually seeing the breakdown through climate catastrophe. We're seeing the droughts. We're seeing the fires. We're seeing the storms. We're seeing the destruction of the Arctic. We're seeing the burning away of coral reefs and the bleaching of coral reefs. We're seeing 200 species dying a day. And we were thinking, what could we do this year that would honor our Mother Earth? Because that's part of our mission now, to end violence against all women and girls and our Mother Earth. How could we really bring all this together? And we started thinking about gardens, that everybody I know right now is growing a garden somewhere, in their backyard, on their front porch, on their windowsill. And we started to think, what if this year were 1 billion gardens rising? And we really started to create these places, because gardens are so obviously generative, but they're also like they insist on a belief in the future, right? You can't plant your garden without a belief that there is a future. And the idea that people will be rising and dancing at their gardens this year, that they've planted collectively, that they've planted together, that hopefully will feed members of their community and lift members of their community and get us to really appreciate and honor and cherish our Earth for her amazing generosity and all that she gives us. I think it's going to be a really beautiful year. And just looking at the posters that are coming in from around the world, I mean, they're so gorgeous. The art from India to Africa to all over Asia, it's fantastic what's beginning to happen.
And in your opinion, what did all this project change in the awareness of women, in what has been happening to the women's movement in the last 25 years?
That's a very big question. I mean, I was just on the phone last week with women from Italy, because they have been doing such extraordinary work, doing 1 Billion Rising. I think it was in 124 cities last year. And we were talking about this horrible situation of the graveyards, where I'm sure everybody's aware of this in Italy, where people, without telling mothers, buried their dead children, their aborted children, and put their names on their graves, which is one of the most horrific things I've ever heard. And again, trying to take women's bodies and agencies over their bodies and their own children away from them and give it to the church and give it to the state, which, as we know, is ludicrous. And thank God for the women in Poland who went on strike today. It's amazing to see the country of women in Poland on strike, and even more horrific to think that there is this attempted ban on abortion. It's so interesting to talk about women's rights, because patriarchy is so incredibly insistent and stubborn and implacable. There's many ways we move forward. 23 years ago, we couldn't say the word vagina. We couldn't talk about it anyway. We couldn't talk about violence against women. People didn't take it seriously. It's a front page issue now. It's everywhere. The escalation of our work onto Me Too and on, it's in our consciousness now. But patriarchy is still so present. We have a world now led by hetero patriarchal madmen, fascist, all over. I mean, how many countries are we talking about now? From Italy to America to Duterte to, let's name a country, right? Hungary, Putin, Modi. We're seeing this rise of this really racist, casteist, hateful, sexist, fascist patriarchy. And I think in some ways, I have to believe it's happened because we were beginning to be successful. I think it's a real pushback against the liberation of women and the liberation of LGBTQ and the liberation of Black Lives Matter and I mean, we can go through all these movements that are beginning to liberate and beginning to transform consciousness and reality. So I think right now we're in a very, very, very difficult period. We're seeing major pushbacks on our rights. And this is across the board, whether it's abortion in Poland, whether it's the woman we just saw appointed to our Supreme Court, who could absolutely undo Roe versus Wade. We're seeing, like, during COVID inside people's homes, this incredible rise in domestic violence, which I was just doing an interview in Mexico. The president of Mexico, Obrador, doesn't even believe it's real and is telling people that people are making up this violence when we know in every single country there has been a rise in domestic violence since the pandemic. So I think it's always, unfortunately, we move 2 steps forward and 1 step back, 2 steps forward. And we really, this time, have to move forward and forward and forward and not get pushed back. Because in that pushback, many women die. In that pushback, many women's rights are totally disabled and devastated. And we can no longer live that way. It's just, and the other thing I would say is I think one of the big things that's changed over these years is that we have a much more intersectional feminism. We understand that we can't move women forward without looking at the impact of white supremacy or casteism or class. We can't move women forward without looking at nature and impact and climate catastrophe, because they're so deeply connected. We have to look at workers' rights. We have to look at so many other pieces of this story. Like, for example, in the Congo, the extraction of minerals from land that has been stolen, right, involves women being systematically and massively raped, right? Because if you rape women in their communities, they flee, and then people take over their minds. So we can't separate the violence being done to women from capitalism, because capitalism and the rabid escalation of this kind of morbid capitalism is escalating violence against women in tandem.
One of the things you did this summer was very interesting for me. You made a series of interviews with nurses. Can you tell us something about this project?
Well, I think one of the things about this pandemic, and I'm sure it's true in Italy as well, it's laid bare all of these inequities, injustices, inequalities that have been here for hundreds of years. They're just completely apparent now. So whether that means like healthcare in this country, not for all, whether it means, pre-existing conditions, which are really systematic oppressions, right? Whether it means we don't take care of our people, and so they get evicted and we just let them get evicted. We have a predator in chief who's basically thrown up his hands and says, whatever happens, happens. I have really become more and more aware, although I've been fighting for women's workers' rights for years, that our workers who have been on the front lines, who are saving our lives, are the most unprotected, uncherished, and make so little money. And so for a period of time, we've been doing interviews with domestic workers and women who work in poultry plants and healthcare workers. And I am particularly obsessed with nurses, because I had a very bad cancer 10 years ago and I almost died. And it was really nurses who saved my life. And I've been very involved with the National Nurses United, which is one of the biggest and scrappiest unions in this country. And they had asked me if I would create something for their conference this year. And I was so happy to do something for them, because they are literally, as they are in Italy, because I've seen them on the front lines every day, giving their lives, risking their lives, and with so little protections and with so little funding and support. And so I spent weeks interviewing nurses, which was so emotional and so profound. I just really believe they are the radical angels of the heart. And they teach us all what goodness is, and they teach us all what it means to be a bodhisattva on this earth. And, when people say, like, who gets you up in the morning or who do you admire? It's nurses, it's frontline workers. It's the people who are risking everything for us and without any recompense except for the act itself. And so I did those interviews, and then we turned them into I think a very beautiful theatrical piece, which is now, if people want to see it, it's up until November 3rd on BAM.org. And we had wonderful performers from Marissa Tomei and Connie Britton and Billy Porter and LaChance and Rosie O'Donnell. And it's been fantastic. I mean, thousands of people have watched it, and we're raising money for nurses, and we're spreading the word that we need, all of us, to hold our nurses, to hold our healthcare workers, and to honor them and to cherish them and protect them, because they're taking care of us, And
you were talking about virtual theater. How did it work?
About what? Sorry?
You said that that kindness, the project you made with the nurses, is with virtual theater. How does it work?
Well, it's, I've been very reluctant to think about theater in these boxes. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want any of my plays done, but I said to myself, maybe if we get all these actors together and we can really just inspire each other with this material, something will happen. And I was so moved to see how these actors really allowed these nurses to come into them. It was so emotional, our performance and the rehearsals. It was so beautiful. And I actually think when you watch this piece, it feels like theater. That's what people have said to me. It's as close as we're going to get for a while. But I'm not giving up theater. I'm one of these people who needs to be in the flesh. I need to be touching you. I need to be breathing next to you.
It's important to touch other people. You wrote a wonderful piece about word without touch, which is the word we are getting into now. This is the book you wrote about your illness in the body of the world. What can you tell us in this situation with this pandemic coming around from the perspective of your experience on illness? And I think you have something to tell us about that.
Well, I think we always want to separate our bodies from the world, right? Our bodies are the world. This virus is coming from the pollution and dishonoring of our earth, right? We're going to see more and more viruses if we don't change our relationship to our mother. And I think what I learned in a very radical way when I had stage 3-4 cancer is that I wasn't, as much as I had been working my whole life to get back into my body since I'd been raped and since I'd been beaten, I wasn't fully there. I wasn't fully there. And I wasn't there because, you know what? I didn't notice that I had a tumor inside me the size of an avocado because I was racing around the world trying to end violence against women, trying to create plays, but I wasn't taking care of my own body. I wasn't in my own body enough to know that something was really wrong with me. And I think when I was leveled, and I was certainly leveled, when I found out that I had stage 3/4 uterine cancer and I could die, and and I had to go into the hospital, and I had a 9-hour surgery where I lost 7 organs and 70 nodes, and I woke up with bags and tubes. But I'll tell you something amazing. It was the first time in my life that I was a body. I was a body. I was just my body. And as painful as it was, I had a scar down the center of my torso. I had bags. I was in my body. And it really began this journey of me understanding that, I had an infection at one point in my body that was really, really bad. And I lost 30 pounds and they didn't know if I would get rid of it from the operation. And it was at the exact same moment that the spill happened in the, off New Orleans. And there was a horrible oil spill and everything got contaminated, and the pelicans and the birds. And I swear to you, I felt that oil contamination in my body. It was not separate anymore. I understood that what we do to our birds, what we do to our trees, what we do to our coral reefs, what we do is happening to us. This virus is a manifestation of our not paying attention, of our not honoring, of our not being careful with the earth around us. And I think, this desire to blame it on China and to blame it on this virus could have happened anywhere, because we're not taking care of our earth. We're not paying attention. We're extracting oil. We're devastating ozone. We have more emissions and emissions and emissions. And instead of saying, let's stop and evaluate, how are we going to go forward? So sorry. How are we going to go forward as humans? 1 second, Pablo, stop. How are we going to go forward and attempt to survive as human beings on this planet? Capitalism has us racing and extracting and getting more and more and more. And all of us need to put on the brakes and make a decision. Do we want to be here to compete and to be commodify and accumulate, or do we want to be here to connect and care and to be in a caring relationship with each other and the earth?
And I think that the word care, as much the word care is very important, and it is what nurses do, take care of other people. And I think this is a point that connects the things we have been saying. Another thing I read that you did in the last months is piece for The Guardian, which is called "Amazon is the Vagina of the Earth." What did happen in that conversation?
Yes, I had the privilege and honor of interviewing the incredible leading feminist indigenous rights leader, Celia Sacraba, from the Cerrado in Brazil, the Cerrado forest, which is near the Amazon. And she's just a force of nature, and is really creating a very powerful movement of indigenous women with other leading indigenous women's rights leaders. So I was thrilled to have that interview and to really talk about what's happening in the Amazon, the devastation of the forest, the devastation of the indigenous people through COVID and through people bringing COVID in, miners who are bringing COVID in, loggers who are bringing COVID in, who are destroying not only the forest, but are destroying the indigenous who've been the great caretakers of the forest.
I think all the experience we talked about got into a letter you wrote, a letter to Mother Earth. Can you tell us which was the inspiration that gives you the idea to write this text?
Well, I think after I had finished the apology, I was talking a lot about apologies and why, particularly to men, why men need to study and understand what an apology is. And I said, and I was kind of breaking it down. I did a TED talk where I talked about its 4 parts. And I was being, and then one day I suddenly said, well, who do you have to apologize to? And I made a few personal apologies to people I hadn't ever. And then I thought, no. I moved to the country 5 years ago, and I live in the woods now. And I really didn't see the earth before then, not in a true way. I lived in the city. And I felt I needed to take time to apologize to her, to really say that I was sorry. So this letter was that apology.
And do you want to read us this letter?
I would love to read you the letter.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Dear Mother, it began with the article about the birds, the 2.9 billion missing North American birds, the 2.9 billion birds that disappeared and no one noticed, the sparrows, blackbirds, and swallows who didn't make it, who weren't even born, who stopped flying or singing or making their most ingenious nests, who didn't perch or peck their gentle beaks into moist black earth. It began with the birds. Hadn't we even commented in June, James and I, that they were hardly here? A kind of eerie quiet had descended. But later they came back, the swarms of barn swallows and the huge ravens landing on the gravel one by one. I know it was after hearing about the birds that afternoon I crashed my bike, suddenly falling, unable to prevent the catastrophe ahead, unable to find the brakes or make them work, unable to stop the falling. I fell and spun and realized I had already been falling, that we have been falling, all of us, crows and conifers and ice caps and expectations, falling and falling, and I wanted to keep falling. I didn't want to be here to witness everything falling, missing, bleaching, burning, drying, disappearing, choking, never blooming. I didn't want to live without the birds or bees and sparkling flies that light the summer nights. I didn't want to live with hunger that turned us feral or desperation that gave us claws. I wanted to fall and fall into the deepest, darkest ground and be finally still and buried there. But Mother, you had other plans. The bike landed in grass and dirt and bang, I was 10 years old, fallen in the road, my knees scraped and bloody. And I realized even then nature was something foreign and cruel, something that could and would hurt me because everything I'd ever known or loved that was grand and powerful and beautiful became foreign and cruel and eventually hurt me. Even then I had already been exiled, or so I felt. Forever cast out of the forest, I belonged with the broken, the contaminated, the dead. Maybe it was the sharp pain in my knee and elbow, or the dirt embedded in my new jacket. Maybe it was the shock or the realization that death was preferable to the thick tar of grief coagulated in my chest. Or maybe it was just the lonely rattling of the spokes of the bicycle wheel still spinning without me. Whatever it was, it broke, I heard the howling. Mother, I am the reason the birds are missing. I am the cause of salmon who cannot spawn and butterflies unable to take their journey home. I am the coral reef bleached death white and the sea boiling with methane. I am the millions running from lands that have dried, forests that are burning, or islands drowned in water. I didn't see you, Mother. You were nothing to me. My trauma-made arrogance and ambition drove me to the crackling, pulsing city, chasing a dream, chasing the prize, the achievement that would finally prove I wasn't bad or stupid or nothing or wrong. Oh, my Mother, what contempt I had for you. What did you have to offer that would give me status in the marketplace of ideas and achieving? What could your bare trees offer but the staggering aloneness of winter or greenness I could not receive or bear? I reduced you to weather, an inconvenience, something that got in my way, dirty slush that ruined my overpriced city boots with salt. I refused your invitation, scorned your generosity, held suspicion for your love. I ignored all the ways we used and abused you. I pretended to believe the stories of the fathers who said you had to be tamed and controlled, that you were out to get us. I pressed my bruised body down on your grassy belly, breathing me in and out. I have missed you, Mother. I have been away so long. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I am made of dirt and grit and stars and river, skin, bone, leaf, whiskers, and claws. I am part of you, of this, nothing more or less. I am mycelium, petal, pistil, and stamen. I am branch and hive and trunk and stone. I am what has been here and what is coming. I am energy and I am dust. I am wave and I am wonder. I am an impulse and an order. I am perfumed peonies in the single parasol tree in the African savanna. I am lavender, dandelion, daisy, dahlia, cosmos, chrysanthemum, pansy, bleeding heart, and rose. I am all that has been named and unnamed, all that has been gathered and all that has been left alone. I am all your missing creatures, all the sweet birds never born. I am daughter, I am caretaker, I am fierce defender, I am griever, I am bandit, I am baby, I am supplicant, I am here now, Mother. I am yours. I am yours. I am yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And hope to see you in Milan in the
Thank
next
you.
edition of Book City.
Thank you. Thank you.